All right, cool. Refresh my computer, life's groovy. And we can see that our app is mad. Why is it mad? Well, first of all, we've not given it any props. So that's TypeScript itself saying like, hey, yeah, you feed me something. Can't find the name props. So we can put props in here, right? How do we do this? Well, we can, say props, but you'll notice that we have, we can click this, but then it does this, and that's not what we want. And the reason for this is that we need to, again, when we are passing in something that has more than one type, right? Yeah. So the error here is that, again, if we're going to pass an object in, right? Because in this case, we're going to need a name and a placeholder. And so this thing here is going to be this. We've talked about the spread operator, I think. And the spread operator is basically copy everything that's in a list and add something at the end, right? So we saw this with our to-do list, I believe, if I remember correctly. And this is just a JavaScript thing. If you're wondering what this is, you're looking for spread operator, is what that's called. So if you want to go and look that up, you may. But what we need here is we need an interface, is what we're going to be looking at. So we're going to say interface input type, and this will have a name, which is a string, and it's going to have a placeholder, and that's also going to be a string. So that's nice. And now we're going to set this to input type, and that should be fine. We should actually make this a capital letter now that I'm thinking about that. So there's that. So now that's happening. Yep, so that's happy. And this is kind of okay, but here's our other problem, right? Is we have this ref thing. And the ref is let's look this up. React ref. Refs and the DOM. So refs are it's one of the things that our use state hook is doing under the hood. Is it's actually that's not true. It's not using refs. Refs are good for managing focus, text selection, or media playback. And refs provide a way to access DOM nodes or React elements created in the render method. So again, right now, what our code looks like is something more like this, and this is actually called our virtual DOM, right? You might want to write that one down. So again, this is not what ends up happening when we actually load the website. When we load the website, we get all HTML and CSS and stuff. But right now we've got this organized in JSX components. Well, those JSX components aren't real. They only exist in our version of the code. Once the code gets broken down, because again, a browser can't read JSX, a browser can't read React, it has to get broken down from React and TypeScript and Tailwind into languages that actually run on the browser, right? And the nice part about this is we don't have to engineer that. That's what React engineers do, is they find the best way to boil that down into code that our browser can read. But so as a result, we have this virtual DOM, and that's the one that our brains are working off of as we're making our application. That's what all of this file structure is this virtual DOM. Eventually, this will get broken down, and again, it should be roughly 3 files, maybe a few more HTML pages, but that's basically what it gets torn down into, and then that runs on here. And what a ref does is it says, hey, React, when you break all this stuff down, you need to keep track of if there's any data changing inside of this component. So in our case, we've got these inputs, this text field, and what we want to do is as we're typing, we want to be able to use the data that we're typing in that input, in that text field, and use it somewhere else. And that's what the ref is useful for. We have one other problem though, right? So we could say, and so technically the way to do this is like that, but it's not sure how to handle this with props, and that's confusing and it's a problem. And so what we're going to end up using comes from React, since we're going to import this up here, import forward ref from React. I'm going to wrap it in this forward ref. Brandon, why are we doing this? Does that make any sense to me? I'm confused. Well, so again, this ref thing, so part of this is how forward ref works, but the problem we have is this ref exists inside of our component, right? So we're tracking what our user is typing and submitting, which is great. Good, we're tracking it. But we need to be able to pass that up a level. So this is kind of like returning that ref value from our input component, from our text field here, passing that up to the input so that then on our contact form, we're able to use that someplace else. So that when we use this onSubmit function, which we haven't done yet, but when we eventually use that, we're going to take the data from the form and send it someplace. And that's really important. And so this is how we're piping that data from inside of our input component, which we're going to put in here, input, and it'll be mad. It's going to go, you haven't given me the props. Where's the props? And so actually we have to import it first. Import, if I can spell, import input. From input, so that's there. And it'll say, cool, I found it. But now it's saying, oh, the type is missing the properties. I need a name and a placeholder. And so that's what we're going to do here. But hopefully that makes sense a little bit more about where we are headed here and why I'm doing what I'm doing. Okay. And so what am I going to pass in here? So for one of my props, I'm going to have that spread operator again. I'm going to see what that looks like. And this is again has to do, where's that thing from? We're going to wait with our register for just a moment. Yeah, that's going to be our use form hook, which comes from React Hook Form. There we go. See, I told you we were going to use that. Great. Yeah, so we're actually going to wait with the spread operator. So don't type that one yet. We're gonna focus on that in a second. We have name equals name, and then placeholder equals, and we're going to have for this one, and this should also be name, because this is going to be what we want to default. So again, we're taking this key of placeholder and the value string name, passing it down into our input, putting it into our text field, and it has to do with this stuff too. But essentially it's going to say, hey, I want the placeholder in here to equal the name, right? And so that's how we're piping that one through. Again, I recognize this is a little bit odd. This is a new way of thinking about these things, but I'm really trying to point out how these things are threaded through, how they're connected, so that this makes sense. And then again, the forward ref, we can look at the docs, but let's see. Forward ref, let's look at the forward ref docs. Here we go. Bing. It's already here. Oh, we're using the beta docs. That's delightful. This will be nice. All right. So forward ref lets your component expose a DOM node to a parent component with a ref. And so reference, by the way, I mean, it's the same thing, but in this case, they're talking about using this for your personal reference to understand it. But you can see here, look at that syntax. Doesn't that look kind of familiar? Doesn't that look similar, right? We have a my input component of some sort, and we're using a forward ref. We're passing some, well, in this case, we're passing a function in, but we just had the props and the ref, but we have to have that ref in there in order to, again, make this accessible to a child component. So again, we're connecting the parent and the children component together and letting them talk to each other is essentially what we're doing here. And so, yeah, so this ref, that's how we will do that. All right, cool. So that's our input component, I believe, unless I'm missing something, but I think that's pretty much it. And yeah, sure enough, that's how that works. Cool. So we're gonna go back to our contact form now and continue here. So again, we pass these things in, and it's still not quite gonna work. Let's go ahead and just run it and just see what happens. Because again, we should be, let's see. Okay, actually, it's not going to do anything just yet because we have a very complicated process we're about to do. Yeah. So we're not going to run it right now. We're just gonna leave it here. But we're going to do this a few more times. We're going to do this for our name, email, phone number, address, and that should be all that we have there. So, we're just going to copy this, and I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. And so you may recall when we made our ORM when we were in Flask, that we had name, phone number, address, email, and an ID. That ID is still going to live here, but again, if we're creating a new contact, that ID should be generated in Flask. That's going to be something that's in, what's the library? It's going to be the UUID library, I believe. But it's in our models.py file in Flask where it's generating an ID. And that's where this is going to happen. So we're going to pass this much information along. Then Flask is going to add that ID and send it all back to the database. And we're going to be able to access that ID then from React down the road. Cool. So let's go ahead and change the names here. No. Boom. Oops, I want that to be... okay, we're just going to have to retype these. So this one's going to be email, and this is going to say email. And this one's going to be, the name is going to be for the email, and the placeholder will be email. All right, you'll get the idea here pretty quick. This one's going to be phone number, which I'm going to copy here. Put it in here. This will be capital N, this will be capital P. This will be much faster in Vim, but I can't teach that one because it would scare everyone. You would not be able to keep up with me. So address, name will be address, and placeholder will be address, if I can spell it correctly. Great. Cool. So there's that. And then we need a submit button at the end. And so at the end of that div before the form, we'll have one more div, and this will be flex, and this will be p-1. And inside of here, we're going to have a button. Yay, we need a button. Pow. So we've imported our button. And inside of this button, we're going to have a class name. No. And this is going to be flex, justify, start, m-3, background slate 300, and p-2, and it'll be rounded, so it looks pretty nice. And we're going to have, when it's on hover, we're going to have a background slate 800. And then the text will be white. Great, and then we're gonna close that off. And what are we gonna put inside this button? It should say submit. Submit. And again, you might be thinking, well, shouldn't I have an on submit for the button? Well, we want to submit the whole form. So that's why we put this in the form component instead of down here. Hopefully that makes sense. Because this button is inside the form. So that form is going to be looking for buttons inside of it, and that's how it's going to execute. Cool. All right, so theoretically, when I run this, and again, all it should end up doing is just logging submitted, so it's not going to actually tell us a whole lot about what we just did. But we should at least be able to see this now. And so we'll come here, pull up the dashboard, open a console, and so now we have these things, and I put stuff in here. It's not going to do anything with it, but when I click submit, it just said submitted, and then it reloaded the page. Again, that has to do with how submit buttons work, but you saw it very briefly over here that actually appeared. So I could make that last longer so that we could see when that was happening. There's other ways of doing that that I'm going to do soon. But for right now, that is the input component, and that is about 13 minutes of video, so we were going to call that a lecture. We still need to add a handle function. We still need to add the rest of our API routes. Right? We got to finish our server calls. This is actually, by the way, this is why I do this, is I can just search this, and this allows me, as I'm building an app, to go, oh, what do I still need to do, right? Oh, I still need to finish the server calls and add the handlers. And that way, before I push an application to production, I just will quick check and see if I have any to-dos left in the application. And that way I make sure that I don't forget that I need to finish something, but I also don't need to spend the time to do all this right off the bat. I need to take the time to figure out how this works exactly. So, anyways, those are just some developer tips to help clarify your thought process as you work. See you in the next video. We're going to keep working on our contact form. There we go. See you there.